public want. I believe we'll speak to an issue later in the meeting.
Okay.
All right, so I think we're good to go. It's 9 o'clock.
Okay. Good morning. Today's meeting of the Neighborhood and Affordable Housing Advisory Board is called to order on July 14th, 2020. Welcome to everyone. The agendas of today's meetings are on the wall at the entrance to council chambers. For those present in chambers, please remember to turn off your cell phones. The agenda for today's meeting is also posted online at myclearwater.com. Due to COVID-19 and related social distancing requirements, the meeting is being held remotely. This meeting is being held remotely. Pursuant to Executive Order number 20-69, issued by the Office of Governor Ron DeSantis on March 20th, 2020, municipalities may conduct meetings of their governing boards without having a quorum of its members present physically or at any specific location, and utilizing communications media technologies such as a telephonic or video conferencing as provided by section 120.4, paragraph 5, paragraph B2, Florida statutes. The members of the board appearing remotely for this meeting are the chair, myself, Pete Scalia, vice chair, Gabby Camacho, and board members Linda Kent, Kevin Chenault, Carmen Santiago, and Camille Hepting. Is Peggy here?
She is not.
Okay. The city has established the following 4 options to ensure public comment for a virtual meeting. E-comments via Granicus. E-comments is integrated with the published meeting agenda. Individuals may review the agenda item details and indicate their position on the item. Comments received during the meeting will become part of the official record if posted prior to the closing of public comment. The city clerk will read received comments into the record. Email. Individuals may submit written comments or videos to nahab@myclearwater.com. All comments received by 5 p.m. the day before the meeting, July 13th, will become part of the official record. The city clerk will read received comments into the record. Call-in number. During the meeting, individuals will be able to call in to 727-562-4646 and be placed on air to speak to an individual item. Council chambers. Additionally, like any other NAHAB meeting, the public may provide comment during the meeting in person at the main library, council chambers, 100 North Osceola Avenue. To ensure a complete record of the board's actions, we ask that each individual wishing to speak clearly state your name and spell your last name for the clerk. Roll call. I will ask the board members to introduce themselves and the fields each of you represent. I will begin by introducing myself. I'm Pete Scalia, board chair, and I represent low-income people. Vice Chair Camacho, please introduce yourself and identify the field you represent.
Good morning. Oops. Yeah, good morning. Gabby Camacho here, and I represent the residential business industry.
Board Member Kemp.
Good morning, Linda Kemp, mortgage banking.
Board Member Chenault.
Good morning, Kevin Chenault, representing the nonprofit industry.
Board Member Santiago.
Good morning, Carmen Santiago, representing the people.
And Board Member Hepting.
Good morning, Camille Hepting, representing the employers.
Our first order of business is to review and approve the minutes of the board's June 9th, 2020 meeting. May I have a motion of approval?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of our last meeting.
A second?
I second the motion to approve the meetings.
Is there any discussion? Do the board members wish to discuss this item?
I do have a correction to the minutes. On page number 5, about middle of the page, it mentions member Chenault reported a conflict of interest. And then the second paragraph is Chair Scalia reported a conflict of interest. Those two need to be switched. Chair Scalia has a conflict with St. Vincent de Paul, and member Chenault has a conflict with Salvation Army.
Okay.
And Pat, that'll be adjusted?
Yes, yes.
Does anybody else have any items to discuss about the minutes? Okay, then I'm going to ask the board to vote on them. And due to board members participating remotely, I'll ask for your vote of this item individually by roll call. When I call your name, please tell the board whether you approve or oppose the staff recommendation for this item. Vice Chair Camacho,
I approve.
Board Member Kemp,
I approve.
Board Member Chenault,
I approve.
Board Member Santiago,
I approve.
Board Member Hepting,
I approve.
and I approve as well. The minutes are approved. Item 3, citizens to be heard regarding items not on the agenda. I will now ask if there are any members of the public wishing to speak to items not on today's agenda. We have multiple ways for the public to present comments, so I'll need to ask staff at various locations if there is anyone from the public wishing to speak. Mr. Lane, is there anyone in council chambers wishing to speak to an item not on today's agenda? If
No,
so,
sir.
please-
I'm
I'm
sorry. go
sorry.
ahead. Continue,
If
I'm
so,
sorry.
please instruct him to step to the podium, state and spell his or her name for the record. Each person will have 3 minutes to speak on a subject that is not on today's agenda.
There's no one in chambers wishing to speak to an item not on the agenda.
Okay, are there any public comments from electronic communication or people calling in?
The city has received no emails, and I don't know about current comments.
Okay, then seeing no one else has come forward, we will move on to the next item. Item 4, new business. Item 4.1, recommend city council approval of the city of Clearwater's fiscal year 2021 through, year 2020-21 through 2024-25, 5-year consolidation plan, and the 2020-2021 annual action plan to implement the goals and objectives set forth in the con plan as required by HUD. Mr. Lane will present this item.
Thank you. Chuck Lane, Assistant Director, Economic Development and Housing Department. Thank you all for being here today, and more importantly, for your commitment to this board and to our citizens. So I'll be using a brief PowerPoint. First of all, you all able to see the slide?
Yes.
Okay. I'll be using a brief PowerPoint to present to you our 5-year consolidated plan and our fiscal year 2021 annual action plan. So as you know, we receive annual allocations from the Home Investment Partnership Program and the Community Development Block Grant Program. Both are from the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, which of course is HUD. The con plan and the annual action plan guide us in our expenditures of these funds throughout the year, throughout the 5-year plan, actually. Let's see. HUD requires entitlement communities to produce a consolidated plan every 5 years. The con plan is based on data and community feedback. The plan identifies the goals and objectives in guiding our expenditures of federal funds in the areas of affordable housing and community development. We're also required to produce an annual action plan for each year of the con plan. The annual action plan identifies projects and activities that are in line with the con plan's goals and objectives. So our objectives are fairly simple. Of course, we have affordable housing, and I think you can group the other 3 objectives on the screen under community development. These are the components to the con plan, to building the con plan. We held community meetings to get an understanding of community needs, and we used HUD-approved data sources to conduct a housing market analysis. So we took that information and it was used to create a strategic plan, which I'll explain in more detail on the next slide. From there, we create the annual action plan to plan and budget activities in the coming year. The Citizens Participation Plan guides how we engage the public through the planning process. So the strategic plan addresses these 6 goals. There are actually 7 goals, the 7th being administration. We added the emergency disaster goal this year. It gives us more flexibility when we need to change gears and respond to a disaster such as COVID-19 or a hurricane. The other 5 goals are the same as our prior plan, or our current plan, actually. The strategic plan goes into a number of different subsections, but all are structured around these goals. So these are some of the major steps we've taken to date, and you've been involved in some of them. We conducted an online survey to collect community feedback. We conducted several public meetings, including NAHAB meetings. We received 28 applications for funding. We convened a technical review committee to help us determine our recommended funding allocations. You all approved those recommendations at our last meeting. And now we're nearing our final stages with this public hearing today, and hopefully council approval on Thursday. So these are our entitlement amounts from HUD from the previous 2 years. The funding from the federal programs has been fairly reliable over the last several years with slight increases annually. This year we got a bigger increase than normal, which is terrific. What you don't see here is the state allocation, the State Housing Initiative Partnership allocation. I'll talk to you a little bit more about that in the director's report section of this meeting, but coming on the state legislative session, we were to receive the highest allocation in our city's history. Governor DeSantis line item vetoed that allocation statewide in the midst of the pandemic, as I'm sure you are all aware of. So public services is the most competitive aspect of our grant application cycle. It's also how we reach most of the people that we serve through our programs. We received 21 applications for public services. We convened a technical review committee to review and rank the applications. The TRC was comprised of our city clerk, a professional from the Homeless Leadership Alliance, and a member from this board. Kevin Chenault served on the technical review committee. I got some great feedback from all three folks. The reason for the application process for public services is so challenging is because HUD limits us to spending no more than 15% of our allocation in a given year on public services. This year, that amount is $125,604. We had 12 successful applications that are subject to that cap. We're also funding homebuyer education services with 3 nonprofits. This activity is not subject to the 15% cap. Important to note, because of COVID-19, HUD has waived the 15% cap for public services in the current year and next year, with a caveat. Any funds used that exceed this cap must be used to prepare for, respond to, and prevent COVID-19. So we have to be very careful. For that reason, we need to budget non-COVID related public services as if the cap is still in place, and we'll handle any COVID related public services separately. We've taken advantage of the cap waiver. We've partnered with 4 organizations to address foreclosure prevention. 3 of those organizations are handling foreclosure counseling for us, and we partnered with Gulf Coast Legal Services to help folks that are facing fair housing issues, tenant evictions, and mortgage foreclosure. So these are the recommended funding allocations for public services that are subject to the cap, and you all approved these last month. One application was denied because of low financial and organizational capacity. We took the rankings from our technical review committee and used the ranking order to place applicants in a predetermined 3-tier funding matrix, with the top tier receiving 45% of the funding, the second tier receiving 35% of the funding, and the lowest tier receiving 20%. So you can see the difference between the total amount requested and the total grants. We're able to fund well less than half of the requested grant funding. That's where the 15% cap makes the selection process highly competitive. The list of service providers contains several that we've partnered with over the years. I think you're looking at a list of partners that provides a wide range of valuable services to our community. So this is home buyer education. These organizations are all qualified to provide that service. This year, HUD has stiffened the licensing requirement for home buyer education. They're going to be requiring one-on-one counseling for home buyers funded with HUD assistance, for example, our down payment assistance program. Up until now, it's all been done by group training. They now require you to pass a pretty difficult test in order to gain the certification to conduct these classes. All 3 of these organizations have done that. So these are the public facilities projects that we're proposing to fund. Directions for Living is planning upgrades to its headquarters on Belcher Road. HEP is planning a rehab at its adult shelter facility. RCS Pinellas is planning improvements to its food bank facility just south of downtown. The Salvation Army is planning security upgrades to its facility on Druid Road. The Arc of Tampa Bay is planning improvements to its space at the Long Center, which of course is a city facility. And the city's Parks and Recreation Department is planning upgrades to Belmont Park, which is located in the heart of the Lake Bellevue neighborhood. So we're able to use a portion of the funds for administrative activities, which is primarily staff salaries. You can see we're able to take a portion of program income for administration as well as entitlement. I think you're all aware the program income is the revenue that is generated from borrowers paying back loans. We do most of our housing activities in the form of loans, and we do most of our community development activities in the form of grants. So economic development, microenterprise, we support Tampa Bay Black Business Investment Corporation and Prospera. Both provide technical services to entrepreneurs and microenterprise businesses in Clearwater. We also budgeted funds to perform facade improvements throughout our low to moderate income areas. And we also have a revolving loan fund for future economic development projects. So the housing pool is where we have the largest balance of available funds. We're able to pay processing fees to 3 organizations that process down payment assistance loans for us. The remaining funding you see on the screen goes towards housing development projects. So we have about $3.6 million in available for housing projects. Now, when you consider that your average unit for construction is about $200,000 a unit in construction costs, you begin to realize how important it is to leverage this money with other funds. Our aim is to be a small portion of a large funding stack in a project of any decent scale at all. We hope to use these funds to support 2 and possibly 3 mixed income or low income and mixed income projects in the CRA this year, which is in our downtown. So community housing development organizations, CHODOs. This is, HUD's always required to set aside a small portion of our home entitlement for CHODOs. It's really HUD's way of encouraging local governments to work with small community-based development firms. HUD has softened this requirement for the foreseeable future, really, where it's actually not even a requirement. If you don't spend that money in the required time, you can convert the money back to your local account. We've had some success in meeting this requirement over the years through a partnership with Bright Community Trust, and we'll continue to do so as opportunities arise. So next steps, we have a few remaining steps to take to complete the submittal of our con plan. Submitting the con plan is actually the local government's way to apply for HUD funding. So with that said, we're not going to flirt with that August 15th deadline. We'll get this plan submitted well prior to that. And of course, the con plan and the annual action plan, they take effect at the beginning of our fiscal year on October 1st. So if anyone from the public has any comments or questions, they're welcome to reach out to me directly. My information is on the screen. I'm happy to talk with anybody about what our plans are. So that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Lean. Are there any questions or comments from any members of the board?
I know this is kind of a repeat, really kind of a repeat item almost from last month. And we did discuss it quite a bit last month, which was some real good dialogue, and I appreciate that.
Is there anyone in council chambers wishing to speak to this item?
I just want to know what the plans are for Prospect Towers.
Okay, that's going to be the next item, sir. And we'll give you a chance to talk at that time. No, sir, no one in chambers wishing to speak to this item.
Okay, are there any public comments from electronic communication or people calling in on this item? None? Okay. Then may I have a motion to approve?
I so move.
And do I have a second?
I second the motion.
I will now ask the board individually to vote on this item. Vice Chair Camacho,
I approve.
Board Member Kemp,
I approve.
Board Member Chenault,
I approve.
Board Member Santiago,
I approve.
Board Member Hepting,
I approve.
and I approve as well. The motion carries unanimously. The next item on our agenda, item 4.2, the staff will update us regarding the recent sale of Prospect Towers. Mr. Lane will present this item as well.
Thank you. At our previous council meeting in June, Councilmember Hamilton requested an update on the recent sale of Prospect Towers and really how it would affect the folks that are living there. Prospect, I'll begin with a brief overview of the tower's history, then I'll get into the current events. Prospect Towers is a 208-unit apartment tower in downtown, historically reserved for senior living at affordable rates. Several years ago, the tower was owned by a nonprofit organization whose mission was to maintain the asset for the benefit of senior citizens that needed an affordable home. Prior to the nonprofit selling the property, rents were kept in the range, I believe an efficiency apartment was $476 and a one-bedroom was $606. I think there's 112 one-bedroom apartments and the remainder are efficiencies. The sale by the nonprofit occurred in 2015. The subsequent owner raised rents incrementally, but still maintained and limited the tower to senior citizens and maintained relatively affordable rates. So while these two ownership groups maintained relatively low rates, there were other factors that contributed to keeping rents at affordable rates. Small size of the apartment units. The apartment units range from, I think, about 330 square feet to about 530 square feet. The tower's age, lack of amenities, these factors help keep rents naturally low. And that's what's going on here. There were also several subsidies in place. Senior Citizens Services is a local nonprofit. They created a fund from the proceeds of a prior sale of the tower, which was used to subsidize 52 apartments in the tower at an average subsidy of about $350 a month. So that's about a quarter of the tenants. There are several units assisted with Section 8 vouchers. The city's housing division, we issued a loan on this property in 2012 for some rehab work. That funding source required that we place a land use restriction on the property. So because of that, 20 units are restricted to remain affordable until 2042. That loan's been paid off, but that restriction will remain in place regardless of the sale of the property. So fast forward to the more recent sales of the tower. The property sold to an investor in January 2019, about 18 months ago, for $13.5 million. This transaction really opened the door for a potential shift in how Prospect Towers was to be managed. When the property changed hands, there were no requirements to maintain the age restriction, accept vouchers, or maintain any affordability standards other than the 20 that are under restriction with the city. This ownership group was planning major renovations, but they changed gears and they opted to put the property on the market, and they marketed the property widely. The property sold to Covenant Capital Group. They're based in Nashville, Tennessee. This group owns more than 10,000 apartment units in the Southwest and Mid-Atlantic region. They have a total market value in these assets they own of about $1.2 billion. They operate, Prospect Towers was not their first acquisition in Clearwater. In January 2019, they purchased Clearwater Oaks on the southeast corner of Druid Road and South Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue. They purchased that for $16.5 million. They acquired Prospect Towers on May 26th of this year with a purchase price of $16 million, and they plan to put another $3 million in renovations into the building. Very quickly after they acquired the tower, they eliminated the age restriction, and they've shown that they will be applying a very different management style to the apartment community. I've spoken with Gavon White. He's the principal and co-founder of Capital. of Covenant Capital. We've been in touch with them quite a bit over the last several weeks since they acquired it. So he's told me about the investments they plan to make. They're going to upgrade the units. They're going to upgrade the exterior, common areas. They're eventually going to charge full market value throughout the complex. When I first spoke with Mr. White several weeks ago, he told me they were not planning to accept Section 8 vouchers. And there are several in the building, as I mentioned earlier. When I spoke with him more recently, he told me that he's now accepting Section 8 vouchers as a short-term to mid-term strategy to help tenants stay in their homes for the time being. Mr. White expressed concerns to me with regard to the impact of rent increases. He knows that most tenants are financially strained. They're planning to increase rents incrementally, keeping them under market value, at least in the short term. They'll be raising rents by 6% as leases expire, which is an average of about $50 a month. A concerning turning point is coming in October of this year, as I mentioned earlier. This is about, as I mentioned earlier, there's a nonprofit organization providing $18,000 in rent subsidy to subsidize 52 units, about $350 per. All 52 of these leases expire in October, and this subsidy will end. So when you tack on a $50 rent increase and you eliminate a $350 subsidy, that's $400 more that these folks will have to pay, which is nearly double what they're paying now out of pocket. Mr. White has told me that his management team has communicated with each of these residents, and they're working to find solutions for all of them. So to bring this all into perspective, the group's long-range plans for the property are to rehab the building, rebrand it, raise rents to market rate, and when the dust settles in 7 to 9 years, they plan to sell the asset to a long-term investor. The fact of the matter is the new owner's plans for the property will change what Prospect Towers is to Clearwater. It's no longer reserved for senior citizens. Planned improvements will raise market value rent. Eventually, the new ownership will seek market rent in most, if not all, units. And those of us that are familiar with Prospect Towers knows that this means many of the current tenants will be displaced. Over the last several weeks, I've had discussions with Pinellas County Human Services Department, the Clearwater Housing Authority, the Pinellas County Housing Authority, the Pinellas Community Foundation, as well as a number of other nonprofits. All are willing to combine efforts to find solutions for tenants facing displacement, although that will be a large task. Mr. Gavon White, the regional property manager yesterday was on the call with council, did answer some questions. They are engaged. They pick up the phone every time I call. They've been transparent with me. So, you know, they're showing a willingness to cooperate as needs arise. You know, it's unfortunate. It is what it is. I think there's someone here in the public that will speak to this item. But at this time, that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have of me.
Are there any questions from anybody from the board?
No.
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Chuck, I have one question. I just want to understand. At one time, the city made a loan on this building. That loan's been repaid, but thankfully, the city was able to at least get 20 units in that building that will remain rent affordable until 2042. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so there's some good news in there.
Yep.
Okay.
Just a clarification on that, is the rent affordable, is that also age restriction, or can anybody move in with that rent on those 20 units?
It's not age restricted.
Is there anything else that the city can do at this time, since, you know, we don't control who owns the building or what they do with it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, you know, I've seen a number of correspondences between concerned citizens, residents, and the council members. And you keep hearing the question asked, or at least implied, what is the city going to do about this? And that's a tough one. We have the 20 units. We do plan to enforce that LORA, land use restriction agreement. The owner has indicated to me that they have full intention to comply with the LORA. But beyond that, there just isn't much the city can do. You know, we live in a capitalistic society, and that comes with its benefits, and clearly it comes with its negatives as well. The city does not have the ability to require any type of rent structure outside of those 20 units. Can't require that they accept vouchers. Can't require that there's an age restriction. That's out of our, in communicating with our city attorney's office, that really is out of our purview. So the answer to your question is there's very little that we can affect.
Would there be maybe a discussion to be had with the investors to discuss going through some of the monies that are available to your department to make those improvements so that some of those can be attached to more restrictions, just like the 20 units that are currently restricted?
I'm having a little trouble hearing you. Can you repeat the question, please?
I'm saying, is there any way for, because you mentioned, I'm going to try this, maybe you can hear me better. You mentioned that they plan on making investments to upgrade the property. Is there any way that we can partner with them in making those improvements so that some more of the units can remain affordable through our programs?
Yeah, I've raised that and to see if they'd be interested in us investing, which would require more units, and the answer was no.
Okay.
They're going to make those improvements, and what the way I see this is the end goal of this group isn't going to change. I don't see that changing. This is a group that has a business model, and they've done it a number of times. It's not their first rodeo. They're going to get to the end, and they're going to accomplish their goal, I'm quite sure, and move on. But I think what we might be able to have some input in is what happens between now and then, and how quickly these folks are displaced, the level of communication maybe that occurs. I do believe that they're interested in trying to soften this as much as they can. But I'm speaking with the owner. He's telling me that, they're telling me what they want me to know. And we're also getting feedback from the residents, which is concerning as well. But we will work to the degree we can. We'll facilitate whatever we can to get some assistance to these folks. I will say that the owner has indicated that they're willing to put some resources towards tenant relocation, which is a good step.
Chuck, I'm sorry, is there any possibility that when all of these, this is impacting how many units in October, did you say 350?
Well, there's 208 units in the building, and in October, there are 52 leases scheduled to expire.
So there's 52 units, 52 persons, 52 people or more that are going to be impacted by this. And it sounds like the owner of the building, he has his business plan, his business model, and he's going to follow that. But it also sounds like there's some room to, as you say, soften the blow. Is there any way if we're working with some of these other agencies and we're trying to help find relocation for these 52 units, would the owner, maybe they don't have to get out in October, would they extend a little bit if they're scheduled to leave or about to be scheduled to leave?
I think they'd be willing to listen to any reasonable request we asked of them.
Okay.
I certainly can't speak for them, but that's been the tone of my discussions with them.
Okay. So there's always room to maybe find a solution.
Yeah. They announced yesterday, they told council yesterday that they think they've found solutions for nearly half of those 52, and they're still working on it.
All right, so we're down to 26.
Somewhere in that neighborhood.
Okay. Are there any public comments? I'm sorry. Is there anyone in council chambers wishing to speak to this item? If so, please instruct them to step to the podium and state and spell his or her name for the record.
Yes,
Each person will have 3 minutes to speak on the subject.
we do have someone in council chambers. Sir? So not your name, sir, and spell your last name?
Yes, my name is Gerald Tellin, Tellin, and I'm a resident of Prospect Towers. I've been there for 9 years, and I just want to know, I'm on the rental assistance program, HUD. And I just want to know what my future is going to be come October the 30th.
Are you one of the people that your lease is up in October, sir?
Yes,
And have you not found anywhere to relocate to yet?
no, I've contacted the Clearwater Housing Authority
Correct?
and the Pinellas Housing Authority, and they got my name in on both. But that's as far as it goes, but nobody has contacted me.
At this time, but there are several agents. If I understand Mr. Lane correctly, there are the city council and there are a lot of agencies are working to help find a solution to this problem before October. You're aware of that?
I haven't been contacted.
Oh, no,
I'm
not
notified of it, no.
But there are agencies that are trying to work to get this through for you. You're aware of that, is what I'm saying.
No, I'm not aware of it.
Okay. Chuck, Mr. Lane, are you there? Can you come back? Can you reiterate what you said? Aren't there several agencies working on this?
Yeah, there are, and it's kind of the beginning stages. I first raised this issue last October with the housing authorities because at that time it was announced that that subsidy that I mentioned, they announced that that subsidy would end this coming October. So the housing authority began working immediately to try to qualify tenants for vouchers. And they say they've qualified in excess of 40 people, additional people at this time. The only problem is they don't have the vouchers. They expect they may get some vouchers, a new round of vouchers beginning of the calendar year, but they're working on it. Both housing authorities are engaged. And they'll do what they can. I have to believe that all of those 52 folks, I think the ownership group will be communicating with all of them. They told me that they've communicated with each of them at this point. We'll see what happens, and it's a matter of trying to help get folks together, get the nonprofits together and housing authorities together to come up with solutions, because there's not going to be one solution for this whole thing. It's going to be
not with that many people involved. It's going to take a whole bunch of different ways to go.
Yeah, just as an
Chuck,
example. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I ask a question? Is there any way that the city can do a survey with those 52 folks' families and get an input about have they really received any communication from the owner about the process? Because obviously this gentleman, he hasn't heard or maybe the communication. The way that they're communicating with them is not the best one, if they try to reach them by email or, who knows, right? So is there any way that the city can do a survey with those 52 folks to see what they're at this point?
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. I think we can definitely look into that. I think we can do something to that effect. I appreciate the suggestion. Thank you. Okay. You have any more comments, sir?
No, it's,
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
just would like to know what my prospects are, what my plans are. Do I move out in the snow or what do I do?
Well, hopefully you don't have to move out in the snow here. That's
No.
for sure. But okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Okay.
No one else in chambers? David, we can take that call.
Hi, good morning. This is Kathleen Beckman. I'm one of the council members here in Clearwater. And I just want, everybody can hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, so I just wanted to first say again, thank you all for serving on this board. Your volunteer work is much appreciated. This topic is especially near and dear to my heart. So I'm, always thinking about what can we do better for those most in need in our community. And I received the same presentation you just received from Mr. Lane about our 5-year plan, as well as the 2021 plan. And in reading that document, there are some pretty shocking stats that we're working with, and we're not the only city nationally that's challenged that way for sure. What I would ask you to read or be sure you check out is that appendix, because that appendix really speaks to the survey that residents completed and the input from the meetings and what their asks are and whether or not their asks fall into what our city can do or has the ability to do or the resources to do is one thing. But I think that, as I stated in our work session yesterday, the way I understand it is, we're given these federal dollars and we have to account for them, and we give those most of the federal dollars to social service agencies and community groups in our community to help take care of those most in need, because that's not the city's expertise, and that's fine. But the glaring truth is that there are far, far more needs than there are dollars to help those most in need. And so what I'd like to do is, what I'm planning to do is try to think more creatively and out of the box and figure out how we can fill some of that gap. And I know that it's been referred to as a mountain, but just because it's a mountain doesn't mean we can't try to chip away at it. I certainly know we're not going to eliminate it. So the reason for my call is just to ask, if anyone there has an interest in pursuing some creative ideas. If you're interested, please reach out to me. I have a council member Facebook page that I kind of put that request out there, and some city officials from other cities have shared some ideas, and everyday residents have ideas, and so I think that's valuable. These are the kinds of things that I just thought I'd articulate 2 or 3 ideas just to demonstrate kind of the road I'm thinking about. So I'm thinking, could we, for example, waive permit and inspection fees if a local church wants to sponsor a home renovation within our community? Can we offer free bus passes to members of a family who are employed and classified as extremely low or moderate income? Again, that's some expense, but I think the goal is we've got to keep these people, if they have jobs, we've got to allow them to maintain that job. And if transportation is a challenge, as it's been articulated in our appendix, then what can we do to, make sure that they're not losing a job because their car broke down or something? In that appendix, we talk about, because up to 25% of residents who live in our high poverty neighborhoods do not have a high school diploma, can we as a city do something to help those people attain the diploma or their GED? Can we allow our libraries to be open, real early on Saturday mornings or later at night when working parents or adults can use that facility to study with a tutor to get their GED? So those are like low cost, I think, ways that maybe we could start to make a little dent. Can we waive business fees, permit fees, some things like that, if an employer in our city focuses on hiring returning citizens? Because that was another concern articulated from residents in surveys. So I just think, we need to think of ways to, to be creative, to help even a handful more people, and then keep track of that. So I believe that you all, this is near and dear to your heart because you're serving on this board, and you certainly have expertise. People that are sitting there, well, on Zoom right now, not on that dais, but if you're willing to take that on, I'd love to have you give me some feedback and share with me any interest you have. So any thoughts?
Ms. Bickman, this is Carmen. I do love your ideas, and I will love to get in contact with you and try to figure out what we can do.
Great. Thank you, Carmen. Okay. Well, anyway, you have my, my email is, on the city webpage, but it's kathleen.beckman@myclearwater.com. And I asked yesterday, you know, I'm going to see if we can have maybe this as a discussion item on a future work session agenda. But truly, it's such a big topic. And with the impending eviction crisis, I think it's even more critical that we start to think creatively about, you know, what we're going to do and what we can do. So, again, I appreciate you listening to me. It's kind of an easy way just to get in touch with all of you on the board rather than sending an email, and to say thank you so much for all the work you do and dealing with this really grave subject, a challenging subject, and kind of a depressing subject, but it's so important to you know, to making a difference.
Chairman
I hope
Scalia,
y'all have a good day.
Thank you so
we've
much,
had,
Councilmember Beckman.
we've always had, since I've been in this seat, we've always had support from City Council with the programs that we administer. Ms. Beckman, and you've all met her. She's come to our last several meetings. She's shown a particular interest and passion, and it's refreshing to see that. It's great to see that. You haven't heard the last from her, I'm sure, and we appreciate it being that way. Thank you, Ms. Beckman.
Thank you, Mr. Lane.
Mr. Lane, just one thought that I have on the Prospect Towers and the upcoming issue. I know that when Southern Comfort Mobile Home Park closed down, the county formed a task force to perhaps provide some assistance and work as a team to work through that. I don't know if any thought's been put to whether that could be put together for these 20 units that are facing issues in October or not. And I really have no idea what other agencies could bring to the table. But it might not hurt to have some of these nonprofit agencies come together and do some brainstorming as a team, as a work group.
Yeah, that's a great point, because as soon as I learned of this, that my mind went right to that Southern Comfort displacement. That was I can't remember how many units were in Southern Comfort, but there were a lot. And
it was in the neighborhood of, it was over 200 when we first started that task force.
Yeah, and you know, that was a date certain too. This will be a series of rolling evictions or displacements, not necessarily evictions. I've spoken with Daisy Rodriguez, director of the Human Services Department with the county. She's very busy right now, as you might imagine, with the tenant, with the rent program. But she has expressed an absolute willingness to participate and help where they can. You know, I've talked to some other folks that were part of that effort. I think, you know, there's a model there that we can replicate to some degree in getting folks together. So I think that's a great point, and it's one hopefully we can put in action. Thank you.
I have one last comment, and it's you know, we're talking about how can we help those folks in most need, but you know, it would be great if this group, along with the city, can advocate for an increase on minimum wage, because that's the bottom of, you know, all these issues. You know, minimum wage being so low, you know, people are working really hard, 2 jobs, sometimes 3 jobs, but they can still not make ends meet. So advocating for a minimum wage would be actually one way to allow people to be dignified by working and making the money that they need to make, you know, more than, you know, because I know we're trying to help, and all those ideas are great ideas, you know, bus passes and things like that. But if, you know, if they would have a decent minimum wage, that would go a long way. Obviously, not even mentioning about having jobs. So that's, you know, but.
Does anybody have anything else to say or add to it, or questions or anything for Chuck, for Mr. Lane? Is that it for comments, Chuck? I mean, there's no other comments, there's no phone calls, there's no one else here?
Nobody here.
So am I right? This is a discussion only item, so there's no motion is required.
That's correct.
Then that concludes the scheduled business for today's meeting. I will now ask board members individually if they have any additional comments. This may include any old or new business, as well as general comments for the public, the board, and for staff. Vice Chair Camacho.
No additional comments. Thank you.
Board Member Kemp.
Nothing additional.
Board Member Chenault.
No additional comments.
Board Member Santiago.
No additional comments either.
Board Member Hepting.
No additional comments. Thank you.
And I have no other comments other than say thank you to the staff again for a great program, and thank you for all you do. And I'm sure the Prospect Towers, the people that are being impacted by this, everybody is aware of it, and I think there'll be some effort to reach out to those people. And that's all I have at this time. Mr. Lane, do you have any additional comments for the board?
Just a couple of things to update you on. We as you know, we started the rent, mortgage, and assistance utilities assistance program for our residents. Now, it was very, we really only had kind of a corner of the issue, because the county, they had all the CARES money, multiple tens of millions of dollars, and they raised up a rent, mortgage, and utilities assistance program, and they were assisting folks from 0 income to 200% of poverty limit. So what we did, we're able to help people up to 80% of area median income. So we took people and we said, okay, if you exceed the county's income, you make more than 200% of the poverty limit, and you make less than 80% of area median income, you will qualify for our rent program. So what that did is that allowed us to eliminate the possibility of duplication of benefits. The county is much more well-funded to handle the program. So we tried not to duplicate the county's program. We tried to complement it. And because that income window was so narrow, we were able to help very few people. I think we were able to help 5 people with actual financial assistance. But what happened is we got hundreds of phone calls and emails, and we were able to give people professional guidance on where they could find help. Most of them referred to the county's program. So although we weren't able to help a lot of people, I think we did. We weren't able to help a lot of people financially. I think we were able to help people by showing them what they could do and how to get help. So I chalk up the effort as a success. Last week, the county changed gears. They eliminated that income cap. So now I believe they're approving everybody that is showing a loss in income due to COVID-19. So now that really pushes us out of the way in terms of standing up this program. So we've put our program on pause. Okay, now that may change very quickly. As I mentioned earlier, the State Housing Initiative Partnership Program, we were to get our largest single year allocation this year in excess of $1.2 million. The Sadowski Act was fully funded. And at the 11th hour, the governor, and it wasn't unexpected, he line item vetoed the SHIP allocation statewide. He kept in place the sale program and the money that's going towards the hurricanes, but he line item vetoed about $125 million of SHIP allocations that were to go to local governments. So we don't have that now. Now, what they're telling us is that money hasn't been reallocated. It's sitting there. I don't believe we'll see it, but that remains to be seen. But what they're telling us now is the federal government is going to funnel money through the state program that will be distributed on a formula basis to the local governments. So we will get some form of an allocation. And what we're being told now is that money, we will be required to spend that money on rent, mortgage, and utilities assistance. So when that comes down, we will reopen the program and we will do our best to not duplicate benefits with the county. I think we'll take maybe a different approach. We'll try to really market heavily to the landlords rather than the tenants, but also to the tenants as well. So when that comes about, I'll let the board know what our plans are and how that's coming about. The Back to Business program, the county also met on that last week, same meeting. They made some changes to that program. Ms. Anderson's on the line. She may want to speak to it. I think they've expanded the eligibility of that program. And what it's really done, it's caused us to pause on that as well. Again, the county has the CARES money, tens of millions of dollars in that fund that is funneling this program. We were funding it mostly out of general fund, some out of CDBG, which is tough for us to do. It's not something government that we've done in the past. It's not the typical way we assist financially. We kind of, I'm not going to say we're out on a limb on it, but it was something that we're not used to doing. So that program has been put on pause as well. Ms. Anderson, do you want to comment on that?
Sure, thanks. I want to make sure. Yeah, so the Back to Business program, we had over 1,000 businesses register. About 770 completed the pre-qualification component. Our program differed from the counties in that we had home-based businesses in there, and we set aside our CDBG COVID money for that purpose. Our legal department determined we could use general fund reserve for brick and mortar establishments, but we're unable to establish what is known as a public benefit, which is a requirement of use of general funds. Could not establish a public benefit for the expenditure of general fund reserves for home-based businesses. Brick and mortar versus home-based businesses, those applications came in at about a 3-to-1 ratio. We were unable to approve thus far any home-based businesses. We followed criteria similar to Pinellas County in terms of eligible business types, and it really restricted that pool for home-based businesses. We do have a couple in the pipeline we may be able to approve, but because the COVID money we received is income restricted, there is the income verification process that we cannot get around. And that's become quite challenging in terms of getting these home-based businesses to the finish line. My recommendation to City Council yesterday, and they'll take up the item on Thursday, is to pause the program in large part because of the county's program, which is now expanded to include additional eligible business types as well as home-based businesses. I spoke with Mike Meidel, my counterpart at the Pinellas County Economic Development, and they also set aside funds for childcare facilities, both home-based and facilities, commercial facilities. Those facilities will not need to go through an application process. There's about 280 residential childcare facilities in Pinellas County. They will automatically receive a $5,000 grant without application. Those funds will be going out. The grant program that does require applications, they'll be outsourcing that application process. They have not identified yet or entered into contract negotiations yet with a firm to do that. Tampa and Hillsborough have contracted, and so it's likely they may piggyback or have a similar process. Bottom line is county set aside $54.9 million last Tuesday for direct assistance to businesses to include creative arts, micro enterprises, minority diversity program to include micro enterprises, and assistance by organizations like Prospera and BBIC to assist these businesses in accessing these funds. Because we're unable to print money, because we did not get a federal allocation to the tune of $170 million like the county, I think the county's program is very robust. There's some discussion about at the federal level that the city could receive a substantial allocation in the next stimulus package. And the county has set aside $12.9 million to redistribute to the cities for to compensate for some of their COVID-related costs. Those funds cannot be used to pay for the grant program, but it can offset some of the other costs that the city has incurred over the last several months. So we're waiting to see kind of what comes down in the federal plan, what gets allocated out of the county's $12.9 million to cover some of the city's hard costs. And we're waiting to see how the implementation of the county's new program moves forward. Should council agree to pause the program, they can certainly take it up again in early August at the next council meeting. And we are prepared at any time to move forward on a phase 2 and have established new criteria and simplified our application process. So if if we're directed to move forward with a phase 2, we're able to move to implementation very quickly. But that was my recommendation on Tuesday, and I believe there's consensus to support that recommendation. Additionally, our program had a $2,000 grant that was contingent upon completion of professional services. For brick and mortar businesses, we have issued $3,000 grants to those who qualified. For home-based businesses, if we're able to get some qualified, and for those brick and mortar businesses, completion of professional services, which means business counseling, accounting, legal, web design and related services, and marketing support is being accessed and provided by, our partner agencies, which are Amplify, Clearwater, Prospera, and BBIC, and provided by professional service providers out there in the community. Once those services are complete, we'll pay for those services up to $1,000 per applicant and issue a second grant. I asked council yesterday to separate those two, that contingency, so that we can pay that second grant immediately. We recognize that with the resurgence of COVID, the financial stress has not been alleviated in many ways. And so we'd like to be able to issue that $2,000 grant immediately and then move forward, continue to move forward with those professional services without that requirement in place. Why add stress to what these businesses are already feeling? So they'll take that up on Thursday during that discussion, and we'll know a little bit more by the end of that meeting how we're going to be proceeding in the immediate short term.
So we threw a few things at you there with the business program, the rent program, and the state allocation that's been vetoed. Do you have any questions for either me or Ms. Anderson on any of those items? Okay. That's all I have, Mr. Scalia.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lane. Then our next NAHAB meeting is scheduled for Tuesday. I'm sorry, I moved ahead of myself. That concludes the scheduled business for today's meeting. I will now ask board members individually if they have any additional comments. This may include any old or new business, as well as general comments from the public, the board, and for the staff. Vice Chair Camacho.
No additional comments, thank you.
Board Member Kemp.
No additional, thank you.
Board Member Chenault.
No additional comments.
Board Member Santiago.
No additional comments.
Board Member Hepting.
No additional comments, thank you.
None from me. That would mean that our next NAHB meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, August 11th at 9 a.m. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.